If we do well here, if we meet our obligations, if we're moving ahead, then I think freedom will be secure around the world. If we fail, then freedom fails.
Well, in 1960, a friend and I were walking home from school. It was in the spring, and a lady came out of the old Union Grove Library and asked us if we wanted to meet what might be the future president of the United States. And so we were 9 years old, and so we said sure. And we stood in line for about 10 minutes and shook hands with a gentleman, not really knowing much about him. And then she announced that he was John Kennedy and was running in a primary against Hubert Humphrey at the time. And he ended up winning the primary and eventually winning the presidency against Richard Nixon. And we went home and told our parents that we had shook hands with this man, and he was a famous senator, and that's what they told us. We didn't know much about it. But as years went by, the memory stuck, and I'm sure my friend remembers it, and I remember it well.
Do you remember saying anything to him, or him saying anything?
You know, we didn't, either one of us that I know of said anything to him, and at the time, we weren't that impressed. He was just an older guy that was shaking hands with us. So we didn't know much at the time, but my parents knew who John Kennedy was. And when I went home and said who I had shook hands with in the little library downtown, they were pretty impressed because they knew who John Kennedy was and were a fan of John Kennedy's.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I was in school at the time that Kennedy got shot, and it was the next year, a couple of years later. And when we were in the school, my father was the principal of the school and our 7th and 8th grade teacher at the time. And so as soon as it happened, of course schools didn't have TVs back then, but my mother found out about it, and she literally came over to the school and told my dad what had happened. And he actually let school out at noon that day, or whatever time it was. He let school out for the rest of the day. So that's how that came about. We were actually in the classroom. Mom came, told Dad that Kennedy had been shot, and he let school out for the rest of the day. And I think a lot of the nation did that.
Did you know at the time how historical the moment was?
I think people did. I think Kennedy made such an impression on people that I think people did, and I think I did at the time. There was a lot of mourning over when Kennedy got shot, and a kind of a disbelief amongst people that somebody actually would shoot a modern day president.
And did you think back that day on meeting him?
I told the story again and again that I had actually met the guy and shook hands with him, although at the time, like I say, it didn't seem like that big a deal.
It must not have seemed like it had happened all that long ago.
It hadn't really. It was, just several years. It hadn't been that long, 3 years.